Kia ora everyone, a very warm welcome to you. Welcome back to No Boundaries. I am joined today by two fabulous girl dads. I have got Mike Hesson from Dunedin and Scott Styris, who couldn't make it into the studio today.
Hello,
Scott,
Laura.
for the first time, how are you?
Yeah, good morning. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for joining us. We've got a lot going on in the cricketing world at the moment, and I say the cricketing world, it just seems to keep expanding. For those of you who've been watching on Sky Sport at the moment, you would have seen some of the Major League Cricket tournament that's at play. Plenty of Kiwis taking part in that. An extension of the IPL is almost what it feels like with the teams that we have got playing in there. Hess, I'd like to start with you. What have you made of the MLC so far?
Yeah, actually pretty good standard so far, Laura. So I think, the facilities are pretty good. So I think one of the challenges that's happened before, taking competition to the US has been the quality of the pitch. But the pitch is actually very good. So therefore there is some high scoring. You are getting actually to see the best players rise to the top. And we're also seeing a few new faces as well, along with the likes of Corey Anderson, an old face who's come to life again with his shift to the US and played really nicely when he got that 91 in the heat in that first game for, I think it's the San Francisco Unicorns is his team. So some good cricket and some, as I said, some nice new faces that we've seen as well.
Now, I tell you, I've just recently been over in Dallas in the build-up to this tournament, and I learnt what the San Francisco Unicorns means. So in San Francisco, it's like the capital of startups, business startups. And if you create a startup business and it gets to $1 billion, it becomes a unicorn. So that is why San Francisco is called the Unicorns. This is what I learned. I thought it was very interesting. Scott
Nice.
Styris, you played for almost every franchise around the world in T20 cricket at a point. When you first heard about this MLC starting in America, what did you make of it, and from what you've seen, do you like it?
Yeah, I think it's great, first and foremost. I do have a few worries about it, but, we went to the US back in 2010, I think it was, straight after the T20 World Cup that was played in the West Indies, and Hess, yeah, you bang on right, the cricket pitch was terrible. I mean, that's why I asked the question before we came on air, because I think we only hit 3 boundaries and beat Sri Lanka with that in a T20 international because the pitch was just so bad. So that was the big concern I had, because you want to showcase it. You want it to be full of action. You want it to be a good pitch so that we get some high scores, and you never know, we may convert some Americans to cricket and expand the cricket universe, if you like. So the only worries I have, I'm just wondering about, all these IPL sides. I was a big fan of it. There's been a lot of talk in India as well about players maybe signing full-year contracts. I mean, Hess will know a lot more about that. And if that's the case, we still want to have meaning to all these competitions around the world, because that's how your competition grows. We see it in the IPL, a lot of meaning that competition's going from strength to strength. So it's more about, for me, I'm looking at this more on a big picture scale. How do we create meaning with these tournaments rather than the players just going through the motions?
Yeah, that is a very good point, because meaning with the tournament also meaning for playing international cricket, and there's certain players out there that, it still means it's everything to them to represent their country, and others perhaps, and, the reality is that might be shifting for them when you think about the money that's at play here, the money that's at stake. You're right, they talk about the multi-year deals now that the franchises from IPL might offer them. But actually, I saw Harry Brock from England, I beg your pardon, they were talking about the ECB. He'd be the first player to be offered a multi-year contract with the ECB here. So is that something that perhaps New Zealand cricket could look at going forward?
Well, I think they've got to change the model that they've got. I mean, the collective agreement's been recently signed again in New Zealand. I'm not sure if it was for 4 or 6 or 8 years. I'm not sure of that detail. But I think the landscape is changing so quickly that, they have to regroup and say, look, is the model that we have actually going to work? And the ECB, with the flexibility they have in their contract, can actually do something like that. But it will challenge them from a financial perspective, to be able to, you can't just lock someone away, for a year and think that they're going to keep coming back year in, year in with a, with a contract that's probably worth significantly less than what they would get if they went on the circuit. So, the likes of Trent Boult's probably one of the first guys who are doing that, and are doing that probably pretty effectively from a financial perspective. But therefore, he can then pick and choose what he wants to play. And is that right? Is that the way that New Zealand cricket want it to be, where you just come back for pinnacle events? And therefore, it would become a little bit like football, where your club becomes your major employer, and therefore you come back and play internationals when and if you can. So, that's going to happen in time. It's just a matter of when that happens. But I mean, looking at the Major League, it looks like there's a bit of feeling in it. It doesn't look like there are players going through the motions, which I think is a good thing. And probably because some of those players are seeing this as a real opportunity for them to force their case potentially for more franchise tournaments, or as we see with the international calendar from a Black Caps point of view being less, they might have to be able to pick and choose or perform in these tournaments to get selected for their national side again. So the meaning of these tournaments will start to evolve, I think, over the next sort of 6 to 12 months.
Hess mentioned before Corey Anderson. Now, we all remember him when he played for New Zealand. I remember, and I think he gets a bit of a bum deal here, because in that semi-final at Eden Park in 2015, we often talk about Grant Elliott in that final six, but Corey's innings in that game was pretty crucial. He played some amazing knocks for New Zealand. I remember his fastest century as well. And then he just disappeared. He married a beautiful woman that lives in Dallas, and that's why he moved over there. They've now got a son. But to see him out there scoring 91, can still hit a ball as big as he always could, as far as I could see. What do you think that says? Like that's as cricket fans, we're watching that going, damn, we missed one here.
Yeah, I think he's the one that got away. He's a hugely talented player. Maybe didn't have quite the drive that you'd want from an international player who was striving for consistency and world-class performance, but the talent was unquestioned. So, it brought a smile to my face seeing that 91. I've been scorecard watching a lot of this tournament, but, I do feel like I wish he was still there, because I just wonder too, with the World Cup around the corner, that all-rounder position, certainly someone who can bowl seam, is a position that New Zealand would love to have him in. You're right, the match-winning ability is there. We've seen it in the past. And, he's still probably young enough, but I think that ship has sailed now, unfortunately. Yeah,
it is a bit unfortunate. He always had a knack with the ball as well, a bit of a golden arm. Whenever you needed a wicket, bring on Corey Anderson, boom, there it is.
Yeah, look, he was a great player for us, to be fair. You think about the 2015 World Cup, but even the series before against India, he picked up a lot of wickets. We definitely call him the golden arm, but he won games by himself with the bat. And I think the fact that Corey and James Neesham competing for a spot actually brought the best out of both of them. I think the fact that, you had options in that role, both of them had a dip at Test cricket. Both of them had success at times. I mean, Corey started beautifully. In Test cricket, scored a lot of runs in the subcontinent because he's a nice player of spin. So look, he was a good player. He had a lot of injury concerns, which no doubt stagnated his career at times. But certainly, he was always one that we tried to get on our contract list when I was floating around. That's for sure. Yeah,
absolutely. And like I say, it was great to see him hitting those boundaries over in the MLC. Now, we've also got Devon Conway, who just can't stop scoring runs, it feels like. And Scotty, he's one of those players that you have to think that perhaps Chennai might look to offer him a contract around the world, to keep him on and then release him for the international cricket, because he has played so well for them in the IPL, now this, and there's plenty more that Chennai are involved in.
Yeah, great franchise to be involved with too, because they do treat their players as if they're family. They look after them well. You very rarely see players talk poorly of that IPL franchise. So it'll be a tough decision for them if they do come knocking and say, look, we want you to be part of South Africa. We want you to be part of back in the IPL, and now, of course, this in the US. Terrific player, though. He's as good as anyone running around the world in all three formats. And I think the way he controls it, I still commentate a lot. Hess would have seen a lot of him too. In the IPL, and he was quality the whole way through. I think he was man of the match in the final, so he's used to performing in big games. So he's a crucial man, especially with the uncertainty around Kane moving into the World Cup. But it's a bit of a concern. I would say that if he does get offered one of these contracts, and it'll question his loyalty, if you like. And I don't mean that as a criticism towards Devon Conway, because as players, I still look at things from a player's perspective. You only get one chance. This is your job. This is your opportunity to set yourself up later on in life. And, but New Zealand has given him that opportunity to be out there on that world stage. So tough decisions if it is one of those I guess, contracts that these IPL franchises are looking to offer players.
Yeah, it's very interesting. And one of the players that obviously has brought this conversation more to the fore than ever, as you mentioned, Hess, is Trent Boult, who was over there playing for Mumbai Indians New York, or My New York. I'm not 100% sure what we're calling them at the moment. But so Trent is over there, as well as Lockie Ferguson, who is very much in that KKR setup as well. And they're taking wickets, although I did see Lockie sort of limping off the park in the match just the other day, which is not so good for any New Zealand cricket fan if we've got that World Cup round the corner. We know this. But what have you made of particularly Trent? Because I guess without that New Zealand contract, although he has that flexible one, whatever that means right now, when you're a player, though, because I imagine New Zealand cricket has a process, or I know for a fact that New Zealand cricket has a process of keeping tabs on their players and looking after them, making sure that their bodies, they're getting everything they need in terms of physio and anything extra. So how does that work when you're an independent now of this? This is all you just have to take care of it on your own, or would the Mumbai team be now helping him in that regard?
Look, I don't think Trent Boult will need to worry at all about how he's looked after. I think he'll get New Zealand cricket's help. Obviously, Mumbai will pretty much send anyone anywhere to look after him as well. And, I mean, Trent was also very professional in terms of how he operates and how he manages his preparation for tournaments. So I don't think that'll be a concern. I think he's bowling as well as ever. His pace is up. He's swinging the new ball. He's coming back at the death and doing what he does best. He's bowling those little cutters. His Yorkers look pretty good at this stage, so he looks to be in good touch and certainly turning games on its head with that ability to swing the new ball. So he's obviously a commodity that everyone around the world is looking for. Any left armer that can swing it down the line and get LBs with the new ball is well sought after, and as I said, I think he's in good touch. He actually also batted okay the other day, which even for these franchise sides, they keep sliding him up a little bit. And he always talked about getting a nosebleed if he got above 11, but I saw him batting at number 8 the other day, so he's certainly showing some skills, and as long as there's no real quick bowler on, he'll be fine.
Scotty, I mean, this is obviously your first time on No Boundaries. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the whole Trent Boult situation, the whole how New Zealand cricket have offered him a flexible contract. What do you make of that as a former player?
Well, firstly, I just want to say, I mean, it is 10 years ago since I played, but I did 3 years of the circuit after retiring from New Zealand, and it actually became quite hard to train. Now, I think it'll be an advantage for Trent that he is in Northern Districts, because they've always looked after their guys, especially even those from outside the area. I mean, Ross Taylor lives in Hamilton. They allowed him to come down and use the facilities whenever they wanted, but Auckland weren't that happy with the number of other cricketers around the country who were living in Auckland and then trying to utilise their facilities. And there was a big problem there of even getting into training. You had to find a way. And that meant even sometimes going down to the local park. So I think it will be an advantage for Trent. But in terms of looking forward, I think New Zealand need him. It's as simple as that for the World Cup. I understand that there will be some feeling around picking and choosing and coming in when you want to come in. But it's a World Cup at the end of the day. And New Zealand's done incredibly well over the last 2 50-over World Cups, but even moving back before that. So I think if they've got any chance, they need him, and I think it's a no-brainer that he comes back for that big tournament.
So the squad is being named for that World Cup very soon, and that is going to be an interesting one for a lot of reasons. They've got that tour to England prior to that, which is, not at all like the conditions they're going to see in India, so that'll be interesting who they pick there. But Hess, what do you think Gary Stead, the coach, is thinking at the moment? Because he's obviously lost Michael Bracewell, who I think would have played a huge role in that side for New Zealand. You've got Kane, who no one really knows what's going under there. I feel like we're keeping that all pretty hush-hush in the hopes that it all comes right. But I don't know. That's a pretty serious injury that he sustained in the IPL. What are your thoughts on the squad and what that might look like?
Well, I think Glenn Phillips becomes a really important player for New Zealand now, and I think the fact he's doing a little bit of bowling in the MLC will be pleasing for Gary Stead. I think the ability to have finger spinners in India that go both ways is going to be critical. Obviously, Mitchell Santner's a lock-in. It probably brings Ish Sodhi back into the mix as well, in terms of, they'd sort of set their one-day side up with Bracewell and Santner being the two spinners. And obviously their ability to bat at 6 and 7 gives pretty good balance to the side as well. So I think Ish Sodhi, as I said, comes back into the mix. He's performed really nicely in white ball cricket recently, including, winning the big, what's it called? The
Vitality Blast,
whatever it is, and Vitality Blast, thank you. That's an old sponsor. Winning that with Matt Henry and Somerset recently, and he bowled really nicely with that as well. So that, I think, brings him back into the mix in terms of maybe going with 2 proper frontline spinners and then using the likes of Phillips as that third spinner. So they're certainly going to have to make a little shift there. I think they need airspeed with the ball in India. So, I mean, the likes of Lockie Ferguson, Adam Milne, whether they're competing for one spot or they're potentially going to take both will be interesting. But I think that's going to be probably the 2 talking points for me. The rest of it, I think, is pretty straightforward if Kane's there. If he's not, then obviously there's a slot for the likes of Will Young to potentially grab.
And Scotty, I'd love your thoughts on this side, because obviously if we are missing Kane, we're missing Michael. I can see a few gaps in that batting lineup that we have talked about on the show quite a bit before. Finn Allen, I mean, we saw a truly peculiar run out from him in the MLC. He was just sort of meandering up the pitch. It was quite bizarre, something I'm sure he won't want to see again. But I think we're yet to see Finn deliver on any sort of promise in the one-day game. So can you bank on taking him, or what does that look like, that team for you?
Oh, there's a lot to unpack here. I mean, I think a lot is conditions-based. I think it would have caused problems, actually, if we had spinning wickets, because, it may have been that they had to go in with 3 spinners, but then there is no other all-rounder. We talked about Corey Anderson a little earlier. I think you're right. I think Michael Bracewell taking over from Isodi would have been a bonus, because if you go on with the 5 bowlers, then you don't have the batting depth that I think will be needed over there. But, I think back... I was wrong in the sense that I wasn't sure they got the team right at the last World Cup. I think we've seen the ODI game moving to a power game. Yet it was the defence, if you like, to use an analogy. You see it in English football or American sport. You get your defence right, then you can win games from there. And I looked at the bowling that New Zealand had. They kept teams down to low totals. It meant that the batting unit didn't have to go as hard. And I just wonder if we are to do well at this tournament, then they have to get the bowling combination right, first and foremost, to be able to keep sides down to lower totals. Because if we are missing a couple in our top order, then that will make the chases or setting totals that little bit easier. But they do have huge questions, because I don't think we have the depth that we had in 2015 and 2019. I think, that golden run that we had, I think we saw not only, probably 6 or 7 of our greatest ever ODI players, but we saw guys waiting in the wings who were terrific as well. And if there were injuries, they were able to step in and do a great job. Now, I think this time around, we need our best 11 fit and ready to go. And I'm not sure we're going to quite have that. So I think we're probably below the favourites for this tournament because of that. But, if we can get that bowling right, then I do believe that, we can certainly win games. But it is pitch dependent. Are we going to see belters, or are we going to see spinning wickets, which may just bring New Zealand into it?
Yeah, you're so right. And I think about 2015, and I was talking about it with someone the other day, about Matt Henry coming in that semi-final and playing the way he did. I mean, that was quite an extraordinary way to kick off your World Cup debut. Like, it was amazing, Hesson. And that's something that you'd obviously worked very hard on in terms of the depth of the side at that point in time. Yeah,
look, you've obviously got to have the talent to be able to do that. You can't just pull them from nowhere. But we were able to sort of spend a couple of years preparing a group of about 20 players, so that hopefully when you get there, you've got succession plans in case you do have issues. And to be fair, the pace bowlers at that stage was a really difficult one to pick, and we even had Kyle Mills sitting on the sideline, who was a New Zealand great in terms of from a new ball bowling perspective. So he was sitting there, and unfortunately from his perspective, Matt Henry came in, and because he was able to do that first change role, came on and went and played ahead of him. So we had a lot of depth in those seam bowling roles at the time, and once again in 2015 we were pretty strong as well. I think the likes of Adam Milne being fit again does help from that perspective, but below, if Trent Boult wasn't there, we'd certainly be exposed, because we are a little bit same. So Trent certainly helps that. Whether Matt Henry is going to be as effective on those surfaces in India, condition-based, is questionable. The ability for someone like Tim Southey to swing the ball over there, I think, will probably be more effective than that seam bowling from Matt Henry's perspective. And then the likes of, as I said, Adam Milne or Lockie Ferguson will be critical from an arm speed perspective. And I think it probably takes the likes of James Neesham out of the equation as needing a fourth seamer. I think you're probably more likely in those conditions to need that extra spin bowling all-rounder. And that's why I talk about Glenn Phillips. James Neesham, I think, will be in that squad, but whether Glenn Phillips, plays ahead of him will be obviously condition-based.
Where do you think Jimmy Neesham sits in this, Scotty?
From the outside, there's no question. I'm with Mike Hesson as well. I mean, it might have been different if we were in England, Australia, South Africa, New Zealand, any of those countries where the ball comes onto the bat and the seamers will be most effective, if you like. But that's why I think it's conditions-based. But the biggest concern for me is the opening batting position. I think Finn Allen, at this point, it's a bridge too far to expect him to come in and be a World Cup winning opening batsman. And having watched him in Pakistan earlier this year, the problem I see with Finn Allen, again, is not talent. He's a terrific striker of the ball. He's a match winner on his day. However, I'm not sure he's figured out how to construct an innings. You know, we go way back in time to someone like Nathan Astle, who just knew how to construct an innings at the top and be the backbone and get to hundreds, which win you games. Finn Allen, I don't think has shown us enough yet. I'd bring him back in after the World Cup. Who that is, whether it is Guptill, Laura, or whether it is, whether they go on that defensive, if you like, and more conservative route, which might mean a Henry Nicholls or, someone else at the top. But I think that's the real concern, because New Zealand need to get off to the good starts to allow that middle and lower order to play with freedom and get them up to a total where the bowlers can defend it.
But Scotty, in the show, we've been in the build-up for this World Cup, we are getting people's Cricket World Cup highlights, flashbacks. 2003 is where we're going today. For you personally, heck of a game, 141 against Sri Lanka. What do you remember about that game? And other than your innings, what did you like about it?
Well, there's a backstory there, and you sort of remember these games for unusual things that happen. And we had a coach in Christchurch named Dave Nosworthy, a South African who they brought in before the tournament to give a real scouting perspective of the way that the pitches play at all the different grounds in South Africa. Because he was South African, he had that experience. And he told us that in Bloemfontein, spinners don't do anything. They are redundant, and that it is the fast bowlers that will do the work. And we played Sri Lanka. And so what did? We dropped Daniel Vittori, of all people, and we went in without a specialist spinner and had the 5 seamers. And Sri Lanka bowled, I'm going to say 60%, 70% of their overs with all their spinners, and the spinners had the most effect. So we completely got that wrong, and we knew it straight away. So we got the bum steer in the sense of the report on how best to win that game. So it was just trying to make the best of a bad situation. The 140, from a personal perspective, it was my first actual opportunity up the order, because I'd spent the first 40 or so ODIs batting anywhere from number 7 to number 11 and 1 or 2 ODIs as well. So I'd had a pretty successful tour of the West Indies in 2002. And I think, like any player, you need the captain's confidence that you can perform a role. And it took 6-9 months for Stephen Fleming to believe that I could actually hold down a batting position and do a job. So to get an opportunity to then start at number 4, I think it was, and really have an opportunity to be the guy through the middle of the innings was one that it had taken a while. And once I got those sorts of runs, then I was there for a few years. So there's a few memories from that game that, whilst the result wasn't our way, it was a real opportunity for me personally, and one that I was glad to take, because I was always a batting all-rounder. Just took time to be able to get to that.
Mike, when I was watching, a big fan of cricket back in the days when Scotty played, you always knew you were okay because Scotty Styris was coming in with the bat. Like, I felt like there was a confidence there, and I'm totally blowing smoke up. No, actually, no, but seriously, when you were watching Hess, that was Scott Styris. There was confidence when Scotty came out to bat, right?
Yeah, I mean, he's actually a really technically correct player, so he actually looks like he knows what he's doing, which is a good start. And he played... He played pace incredibly well. He loved to get into the battle. Obviously, one of the few New Zealand players in that era who was actually very adept at manoeuvring the ball against spin as well. So even when you came across, good at spinners from the opposition, Scotty was always able to get off strike and create some momentum that way. And he had power game as well. So I was actually looking through that scorecard, and obviously the fact that New Zealand had 8 right-arm seam bowling options was one that stood out, but also the depth batting that New Zealand had. So, the ability for Scotty to bat at 4, and then you still had Jacob Oram coming in at 8. There's a heck of a lineup in terms of from a batting perspective. I think Andre Adams was at 9, just a whole heap of batting. So that was sort of an era that those New Zealand all-rounders, you had Astle, McMillan, Styris, Harris, all those guys that could bat and bowl, Chris Cairns, guys that obviously could do a bit of everything, Jacob Warham. So it was an exciting era where you never felt you were out of the game. So, and obviously Scotty was a part of that.
Yeah, and the only man I know on a cricket field to headbutt Mitchell Johnson with his helmet on, which I thought was not the way he's supposed to do it, Scotty, but what an iconic moment.
Yeah, it was. I mean, well, it wasn't really. I get asked about it a lot, which says how much you've done in your career, really. But
we all loved it. No, that's a positive as far as
But, I mean, you talk about, making a step there. That comes from learning and observing. We had some terrific batsmen, Nathan Astle, and Stephen Fleming were the main two at that time. And you watch how they go about their work. And that's why we talk about Finn Allen. I'd be spending all my time, and it's hard when he's on the T20 circuit, but all his time on working on that weakness component to his game, and that's rotation of strike. Take that pressure of just simply hitting boundaries away. And even though it is a power game these days, that's how you build your way through an innings and become a consistent player. And, I don't know Finn personally, and I certainly don't know his training habits, but, that's where you actually end up being able to hold down a spot and become that consistent player is by learning, watching and rotating the strike, because that was something that I had to learn, because when you spend most of your time batting, say at 6 or 5, 6 probably from a domestic perspective before you move up, and then you spending the New Zealand international component of your career batting and where you come in at the end, and it is about power. It does take some time to figure out how to construct an innings.
Gentlemen, I want to thank you so very much for your time today. You've been brilliant. Hess, wonderful to catch up with you. And Scotty, great to have you for the first time on No Boundaries. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Laura.
Thanks, Laura.
And thank you guys so much for joining us. We'll catch you next time on No Boundaries.